Hello friends. Before we start today's stories, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment which story you like most, where you're from, and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. You never really know who's living across the street from you. You wave, you nod, maybe exchange a good morning and go about your life. But behind closed doors, everyone hides something. For me, it all began the summer I moved into Maple Hollow, a quiet, suburban street in Portland, Oregon. I'd just gone through a breakup, and the little two-story colonial house felt like a fresh start. Peaceful, ordinary, safe. That word, safe, was what I held on to the most, until the new neighbor moved in. The house across the street had been empty for almost a year. Overgrown grass, peeling paint, blinds drawn. It looked forgotten. But one afternoon, as I was unpacking boxes, I noticed a U-Haul truck parked outside it. A man was standing in the driveway, tall, pale, and awkwardly still. He didn't unload anything at first. He just stood there, staring at the house. Then he turned, slowly, and looked directly at me through my living room window. I froze. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Just watched me for a few seconds before turning back around and disappearing inside. That night, long after midnight, I heard something. A faint, dragging sound, metal scraping against pavement. When I looked out my window, I saw him, the same man, dragging what looked like a large black trash bag down his driveway. He stopped halfway, stood still again, and looked right at my window. I ducked down instinctively. When I peeked again, he was gone. For the first week, nothing happened. No cars in his driveway, no mail collected. But at night, I'd see a single flickering light in one upstairs window. It wasn't steady. It pulsed like candlelight. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I took out my binoculars, left over from my ex's bird-watching hobby, and focused on the window. There was a shape in there. Someone was moving back and forth, like pacing. The light glowed faintly on what looked like a mask. It was hard to tell, but I was sure someone was up there wearing something on their face. The next day I saw him again. He was standing at the end of his driveway, staring across the street. I thought he was watching me, but then I realized he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, over my shoulder. When I turned, I saw my bedroom window open, the window I'd just closed that morning. By week 2, a stench began to drift through the neighborhood. Something rotten. Neighbors complained, thinking maybe a raccoon had died under someone's porch. But it was strongest near his house. I could smell it every time I walked by. I didn't want to get involved, but that smell was unbearable. So one afternoon I crossed the street. "Hey," I called out, "everything okay over there?" "Smells like something died." No answer. The front door was slightly open, just enough for me to see that the hallway inside was lined with plastic sheets. The air that wafted out was putrid, sweet, and sickly, like decay. Suddenly the door slammed shut, hard. No footsteps, no warning. That night I found a note slipped under my front door. Plain white paper. No handwriting, just printed words. "Don't come back." I called the police the next day. 2 officers came by, took my statement, and crossed over to check. They knocked, waited, then one of them shrugged and said, "No answer." "Place is quiet. Probably some weird hobby. Right. The smell lingered for another week before it stopped altogether. And after that, things got worse. I'd wake up at night and find my curtains open. Every single night. I started locking my bedroom door even though I lived alone, but locks didn't seem to matter anymore. One night, around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in my house. Slow, heavy ones, creaking the floorboards downstairs. I grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed and listened. The sound stopped. Then came a whisper, right outside my door. "You shouldn't have looked." I called the police again. They found no signs of forced entry, windows intact, doors locked. They suggested I was stressed and maybe hearing things. But a few days later, something strange happened. The neighbor's house went dark. No light, no movement, gone silent. A for sale sign appeared on the lawn 2 weeks later. No one had seen him move out. No moving trucks. Nothing. Just gone. Out of curiosity, I talked to the realtor who came to show the property. I told her about the smell, the man, the strange noises. Her face went pale. She said the house had been empty for over 6 months. No one had bought it. No one had keys except the agency. When I insisted I'd seen someone living there, she laughed nervously and said, "You must be mistaken. The last owner died there 3 years ago." I froze. "What do you mean, died?" She hesitated. "He killed his wife, buried her in the basement, then hung himself. The neighbors complained about the smell for weeks before anyone found them." My heart dropped. That's when she said something that still haunts me. "You're not the first to say they've seen him in the window." The new owners moved in a month later. A young couple. They painted the place, fixed the lawn, tried to make it home again. But sometimes, when I'm sitting in my living room at night, I still see a light flicker in that same upstairs window. The new couple doesn't own any candles. They told me once, "It's weird. Our electricity flickers in just that one room. And every now and then I swear I see someone standing in that window, looking right at me. Sometimes when I look long enough, it feels like he's smiling." They say old people make the best neighbors. Quiet, harmless, and always home. That's what I thought too, until I met Mrs. Holloway. I moved into Crescent Pines Apartments, a modest complex in Salem, Massachusetts, after my divorce. It was cheap, clean, and came with friendly neighbors, or so the landlord said. He even smiled when I asked who lived in the unit next to mine. "Oh, that's Mrs. Holloway," he said. "Sweet old widow. Keeps to herself, mostly." "You'll like her," I did. At first, it was my first night there. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock on my wall. Not on the door, on the wall we shared. 3 taps, slow, deliberate. I froze. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I thought maybe she needed help, so I went next door and knocked back. No answer. The peephole on her door was stuffed with what looked like cotton. I called out, "Mrs. Holloway, are you okay?" Still nothing. Just silence. Then a faint voice from behind the door. "Don't let him in." I stepped back. "What?" But she didn't answer. Over the next few days, I'd sometimes catch a faint smell of roses in my apartment. It was strange, sweet, but heavy, like funeral flowers left too long in the sun. I thought maybe it was her perfume, drifting through the vents. Then one morning I found a rose on my doormat, wilted, tied with a thin piece of black thread. I knocked on her door again. This time she answered. The door opened just a few inches, and I caught a glimpse of her face. Wrinkled, pale, her eyes clouded but sharp. She smiled faintly. "Oh, you must be the new tenant," she said. "I've been waiting for you." "Waiting?" I laughed awkwardly. "Well, nice to meet you, Mrs. Holloway." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "If you hear him at night, don't answer. Before I could say anything, she closed the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in that old apartment felt magnified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the distant pipes. Around 2:47 a.m., I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. Only this time, it came from inside the vent. I turned off the TV and listened. Something or someone was breathing through the duct. Slow, wet breaths. I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight to look inside. The metal grill was coated with dust. Something moved deep inside the darkness. I thought it was a rat until I saw a human eye staring back at me. I stumbled back, heart racing. The breathing stopped. Then, softly, a voice whispered from inside, "I know you're awake." I stormed to the landlord's office the next morning. "There's someone in the vents," I said. "You need to check." He looked up from his paperwork, confused. "Vents? That's impossible. Those ducts were sealed years ago after a fire. No access points," I frowned. "Well, someone's in there." I saw an eye. He hesitated. "You said you live next to Mrs. Holloway, right?" "Yeah, why?" He sighed. She's not supposed to be there anymore. We've been trying to evict that unit for months." "What do you mean?" He glanced around, lowered his voice. "Her lease ended 5 years ago. Her family moved her to a care home after her husband died. No one's supposed to live there now," I blinked. "That's impossible." "I've spoken to her." He shook his head slowly. "Son, Mrs. Holloway died 3 years ago." I went back upstairs trembling. Her door was closed, as always. The faint smell of roses filled the hallway again. But this time, I noticed something new. A dark stain spreading slowly from under her door. I called the police. When they arrived, they had to break it open. The apartment inside looked like a shrine. Hundreds of dried roses lined the walls. Photographs of a man, her late husband, hung in every corner. And in the center of the living room was a chair, facing the vent we shared. On it sat a perfectly preserved skeleton, dressed in a faded red cardigan, hands folded neatly in its lap, a silver locket around its neck. The officers called the coroner, but I already knew. It was Mrs. Holloway. They sealed off her unit, of course, cleaned it out, repainted the walls. But I never stopped smelling roses. Even now, late at night, when the lights are off and the world is silent, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And sometimes the vent whispers back, "He's still here." If you've ever lived in an old apartment building, you know how thin the walls can be. Every argument, every TV show, every late-night fight bleeds through, like the building itself is listening. But in my case, it wasn't the walls I had to worry about. It was the floor below. My name's Ethan Miles, and for 6 months, I rented the top floor unit of a rundown brick building in Cleveland, Ohio. Rent was cheap, too cheap. The landlord said the basement unit was sealed off years ago. Just storage now. But the day I moved in, I realized something wasn't right, because someone lived down there. The first night was quiet until around 2 a.m. That's when I heard it, a slow dragging sound, like furniture scraping the floor below me. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate. But the landlord swore there was no one down there. I knocked on the floor a few times. "Hello, anyone there?" Silence. Then, faintly, 3 knocks back. The next day I went to investigate. The basement door was at the end of the hall. Old, metal, with a chain across it. A "Do Not Enter" sign hung crookedly. But there was something else. scratches. Long, deep scratch marks around the handle, like someone had tried to claw their way out. That night, I asked my neighbor across the hall, an older guy named Mr. Delaney, if he'd ever heard anything from the basement. He went pale. "You shouldn't ask about that," he muttered. "Just don't go down there." "Why not?" He looked at me, his voice trembling. "Because no one ever comes back up." I didn't believe in ghost stories, so I decided to look into it. At the local records office, I found tenant logs for the building. Unit B1, the basement apartment, had been rented to a man named Thomas Creed in 1999. Rent paid until 2001. No forwarding address. Just one final note scribbled at the bottom. Tenant disappeared. Odor complaint unresolved. When I asked the clerk about it, she said something that made my stomach twist. "That building, we got reports about noises for years. Police searched the basement in 2002, but they sealed it after. 3 nights later, it began again, dragging, knocking, and a smell rising through the vents. Rot, mold, and something coppery. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight, pried off the chain, and opened the basement door. A wave of cold, damp air hit me. It smelled like a flooded tomb. The light barely reached the bottom of the concrete stairs, but I went down anyway. Each step creaked, echoing in the silence. Halfway down, I noticed something smeared along the wall. Brownish red streaks, old, dried. And then I heard breathing, slow, wet, labored, coming from the far corner of the basement. My flashlight flickered. I caught glimpses. An old mattress, rotted furniture, black mold crawling up the walls. Then I saw it. A section of concrete that didn't match the rest. Newer, smoother, like it had been patched recently. And right there, faintly visible under the dust, were handprints, pressed deep into the cement, not painted, imprinted, as if someone had been buried alive inside the wall. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper right behind me. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around. No one there, but the air had changed, colder, thicker. And then, from behind the wall, came a muffled scream. A desperate, human sound, followed by pounding, thump, 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 like fists slamming from the other side. I ran, back up the stairs, slammed the door shut, reattached the chain, and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I called the landlord. He sounded calm, almost rehearsed. "Oh, you heard it too," he said flatly. "It happens sometimes." "Don't open that door again. What the hell is in there?" I demanded. He sighed. "Mr. Creed. He wouldn't leave. The city ordered the basement sealed after they found the wall. But sometimes he still moves." I hung up, packed my things, was ready to get out that night. But before I left, curiosity got the better of me one last time. I went to the door, knocked once, and something knocked back 3 times. When I looked down, I saw fresh, wet fingerprints smeared across the door from the inside. I moved out the next day. 2 weeks later, I saw a listing online. My old apartment. Same rent. New tenant. The photo caught my eye, though. In the corner of the frame, down the hall, near the basement door. A faint, human-shaped shadow staring up the stairs. When I bought my first home, I wanted what everyone wants: peace. A quiet street, nice neighbors, a place where I could feel safe. I found it in a cul-de-sac just outside Phoenix, Arizona. Perfect lawns, white fences, American flags, and kids on bicycles. Everyone smiled here. Everyone waved, especially the Carsons, the family next door. The Carsons looked like something straight out of a 90s commercial. Greg Carson, the dad, tall, charming, a financial advisor. Linda, the mom, always baking, always cheerful. And their two kids, Mason and Lily. Polite, well-dressed, never noisy. On my first day, Greg walked over with a tray of cookies. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, grinning. "Don't mind the noise tonight. We're having a little family barbecue." It was summer, so I didn't think much of it. Until midnight, when I woke up to screaming. Not laughter, not kids. Screaming. I looked out my bedroom window. Their backyard was dark except for the faint orange glow of the grill. Greg stood there motionless, staring into the flames. Beside him, Linda was cutting something on the table, something that looked far too large to be food. I could have sworn it was a limb. But the next morning, when I went outside, everything looked normal. They waved at me. Linda handed me a plate of leftover ribs. "Special recipe," she said, smiling too wide. The meat was pale. The bones looked wrong, like they weren't from any animal I'd ever seen. I threw it away. A few days later, I came home early and saw Lily, their daughter, standing in my yard. She was holding one of my garden tools, a rusty trowel, and staring at the dirt near my fence. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently. "What are you doing?" She looked up slowly. Her eyes were glassy. "Daddy says we have to feed the ground." Before I could ask what she meant, Greg called her name. His voice was sharp, not the friendly tone I'd known. She dropped the trowel and ran. When I looked where she'd been digging, I saw something sticking out of the dirt. A small jawbone, human. The next week, Linda stopped by again. "We're having a little neighborhood dinner Friday night," she said sweetly. "You must come." Greg insists I didn't want to, but her eyes didn't blink once during the whole conversation. I said yes just to make her go away. Friday came fast. Their house smelled like cinnamon and barbecue. The table was perfectly set, candles flickering. But the food looked raw. Pale meat, red sauce, chunks of something unrecognizable. Greg poured me wine and smiled. "You're family now," he said. "Everyone who lives here eventually joins." I forced a laugh. "Joins what?" He just kept smiling. And then I realized something. The other guests around the table weren't moving. Their heads were tilted, eyes dull, skin grayish, like they were stuffed. I pretended to feel dizzy, said I needed some air, and slipped away. That's when I saw the basement door. It was locked with 3 padlocks and a sliding bolt. From behind it, I heard faint noises, wet, sloshing sounds, and something whispering. I pressed my ear to the wood. A voice whispered back, "Help me." The moment I stepped back, Greg appeared behind me. "You're not supposed to be down here," he said calmly. His eyes were pitch black. No whites, no reflection. Just endless dark. He smiled wider than a human mouth should be able to. I bolted for the door. I don't remember how I got out. I just remember the sound of dozens of footsteps following me down the street. Soft, synchronized, inhuman. I never looked back. I drove away, left everything behind, and filed a report. The cops searched the house 2 days later. It was empty, completely spotless. No Carsons, no furniture, no signs anyone had ever lived there. Except for one thing. A family portrait hanging in the living room. 5 people, not 4. The 5th was me. 3 months later, I checked Zillow out of curiosity. The house next door was listed again. Newly renovated. family-friendly neighborhood. Move in ready. In the photos, everything looked bright and cheerful. But if you zoomed in, right in the reflection of the window, you could see them. The Carsons, still smiling, still waiting. You never really know what goes on behind the walls in apartment buildings. You hear people, their footsteps, their arguments, their laughter. But you don't see them. You live inches apart, but in totally different worlds. I learned that the hard way. My name's Rachel Vaughn, and I used to live on the 4th floor of the Jefferson Towers in downtown Chicago. Old brick building, squeaky elevators, thin walls. It wasn't great, but it was all I could afford after college. And then, the new tenant moved in, next door. Apartment 4B. It started with a smell, something sour, like old meat. Then came the noises. At first, it was a faint tapping, like nails against metal. Then came a dragging sound, sometimes a low hum, almost like someone talking to themselves. The weird part was, no one was supposed to live there. 4B had been empty for months. I asked the building manager about it. He frowned. "No one's rented that unit yet," he said. "We're still fixing the plumbing." I laughed nervously. "Well, someone's in there. I can hear them every night." He shook his head. "Maybe sound travels from upstairs." Happens all the time, but it didn't. The sounds came through the wall we shared, right beside my bed. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I heard 3 soft knocks on my wall. Slow, even, deliberate. I froze. Then stupidly I knocked back. Knock, knock, knock. A few seconds later, a faint whisper came through. "It's so cold in here." My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear to the wall. The voice whispered again. "Can you help me?" I whispered back before I could stop myself. "Who are you?" But there was no answer. Just silence. The next morning I confronted the manager again. "There's someone in 4B, I insisted. "I heard them. They talked to me." He sighed and grabbed his master key. Together we went to 4B. He unlocked the door, pushed it open, and the smell hit us. It was putrid. Rot, decay, and something sickly sweet. The apartment was empty. Bare walls, no furniture. But the floor near the shared wall was darkly stained. "Probably a burst pipe," the manager muttered, covering his nose. He locked it back up and promised to call maintenance. That night, the noises came again. Knocking, dragging, whispers. It's lonely here. I set up my phone to record overnight, facing the wall. The next morning I checked the footage. For the first 3 hours, nothing. Then around 2:14 a.m., the tapping began. The camera shook slightly, like the wall itself was trembling. And then, faintly, a shadow moved across the wall. It wasn't mine. It was coming from the other side, but it wasn't shaped like a person. It was longer, distorted, like something crawling. Then came a faint thump, and the video cut out. When I tried to replay it, the file name had changed. It now read, 4B wants in. 2 days later, maintenance came to check the leak. The worker, a quiet older guy, knocked on my door after. He looked pale. "Miss, did you say you heard things from 4B? I nodded. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Don't stay here tonight." "Why?" He swallowed hard. When I pulled up the floorboards in there, there was something. He looked down. A body, but not fresh. Not right, I called the cops, but they found nothing. No body, no signs of entry. Nothing wrong with the apartment at all. They said the worker must have imagined it. He quit the next day. By now I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing it, the whispering, the soft knocks. And one night I felt something brush against my hand as I lay in bed. The wall breathed. The paint bulged outward for a moment, as if something pressed from inside. I screamed and ran into the hall. By the time I got back with the manager, the wall looked perfectly normal. He thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. But that night, when I packed to leave, I noticed something scratched into the inside of my closet door. Words carved deep into the wood. Help me. They sealed me in 4B. Before I left for good, I recorded one more night. This time, I set up the camera inside the wall cavity. I'd removed a small vent cover near the baseboard. When I checked the footage the next morning, I only made it 30 seconds in. The camera showed darkness, then slow movement. Something pale slithered past the lens. A human face, bloated, eyeless, pressed against the camera. Its mouth opened and it whispered, "Thank you for letting me out." Then the feed went black. That morning I moved out. 2 weeks later, Jefferson Towers caught fire. The news said it started in 4B. They never found the source. But in one of the news photos, if you look closely, you can see a handprint in the soot on the wall. 5 fingers, too long to be human. They say loneliness can drive you mad. But what if the thing you start seeing isn't in your head? My name is Ethan Cole, and this happened 2 years ago when I moved into a quiet, suburban neighborhood outside Denver, Colorado. It was supposed to be a fresh start after my divorce. Quiet, safe, normal. The kind of place where everyone waves, lawns are perfect, and mailboxes shine. I didn't know that the house next door, number 212, was empty. Or at least that's what the realtor told me. The first time I saw her, I was unpacking boxes in my living room. A woman stood in the window of 212, waving. She looked to be in her late 30s, long brown hair, wearing a white cardigan. She smiled softly, like she'd been waiting for me. I waved back. That night I baked a small pie, a peace offering for a new neighbor, and went to introduce myself. When I knocked, there was no answer, no lights, no sound. I peered through the front window. The place looked completely empty. No furniture, no curtains. Still, I could have sworn I saw movement deeper inside. I called out, "Hello?" Something moved near the hallway, a shadow. But when I blinked, it was gone. The next morning, I asked the mailman if anyone lived next door. He frowned. Hasn't been anyone in 212 for almost 3 years. Foreclosure. You might have seen the cleaning crew. But I saw a woman last night. He gave me a strange look. You sure about that? That evening, I looked again. At exactly 7:23 p.m., the same woman appeared in the same window. She waved, but this time, her head tilted slightly to the side, and I realized she wasn't blinking. A few days later, I heard knocking, faint, rhythmic, coming from the shared fence. When I went outside, there was no one there. Only my phone sitting on the patio table, the screen on, recording by itself. I played it back. There was a woman's voice whispering, "Ethan, why did you leave me?" I dropped the phone. That night she was in the window again, but this time her smile was wider. Wrong. And she wasn't waving, she was pointing at me. I finally called the police. 2 officers came, checked the property, and found nothing. One of them, Officer Daniels, looked at me and said, "This house has been empty since 2019. You can check the city record yourself." Before leaving, I asked if anyone had died there. He hesitated, then said quietly, "A woman. Murder-suicide. Husband killed her, then himself. Their names were Ethan and Marissa Cole." My blood froze. "My name is Ethan Cole." He frowned. "Yeah, must be a coincidence." But it wasn't. It was the exact same spelling, the same full name. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3:14 a.m., I heard footsteps on my porch. When I checked the peephole, she was standing there. Marissa, the woman from the window. Her cardigan was soaked dark, her face pale and stiff. She whispered through the door, "You came back." I ran to the window. Her house was dark again. But when I looked back, my front door was wide open, and my house phone was ringing. When I picked it up, I heard my own voice say, "Why did you do it, Ethan?" In the following days, things blurred together. Lights flickering, doors closing, photos rearranging themselves. I started hearing her humming inside my walls. The final straw came when I walked into my bathroom one morning. Steam covered the mirror, but in the fog, words appeared. 212 is home. I rushed next door again. Couldn't help it. The front door of 212 creaked open by itself. Inside, it was freezing, and there were pictures on the wall of me, hundreds of them, different angles, some from my kitchen, my bedroom, even my shower. In the center of the wall was one final photo, me standing at the window, looking into her house. But in that photo, she wasn't there. It was just me, staring at nothing. I moved out the next day. The realtor handling the sale called me a week later. She sounded uneasy. "Mr. Cole, I don't know how to say this, but that neighborhood doesn't have a number 212 anymore. The lot's been empty since 2020. I thought she was joking. Until I checked Google Maps. The spot where 212 should have been was an overgrown patch of grass. No foundation, no debris, just emptiness. I went back to see it in person. Nothing. But when I turned around to leave, in the reflection of my car window, a woman in white stood behind me, smiling. I left Denver that night, but sometimes I still wake up at 7:23 p.m. and see her in whatever window happens to be across from me, smiling, waving, and now she started knocking again.